Welcome. Welcome to our webinar today. Hello, my name is Richard Hollis, and got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. You know, those of you who know me, and I've looked at the attendance list, there's quite a few of you who do know I've got a problem with webinars because I need to see people's eyes to make sure that they're getting this. So a couple things. First of all, we've got about a half hour of information, just practical, common sense stuff we'd like to go through with you. This is one in a series of webinars that we're giving on holistic security penetration testing, testing people, process, and technology for bigger picture. So we call the series 3 Degrees of Security Testing. This is one in a series of webinars. You can find the rest on our website. But in terms of what we're going to talk to today, the idea is to come up with some pragmatic recommendations for how you can fully optimize and get the most out of your penetration testing as possible. And you know, who wouldn't want to do that? So that's what we're here to do today. Before we get started, let me answer the question that's on everybody's mind. It's true, the camera adds at least 10 to 12 pounds. So I'm in better shape in person than I seem over a webinar camera, but I thought we'd address that question now rather than leave it for the Q&A. Yes, we have Q&A. Let's go through what we're going to do today. We've got, you know me, you don't know me. I'm a director here at Risk Crew. I preach the gospel according to process over product. All right. So as a director here, we're big on being product agnostic and recommending common sense, pragmatic advice. To our clients in governance, risk compliance, and testing. And we put skin in the game. Any service that we provide, we give 100% satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not pleased, you don't pay for it. That's as simple as that. This isn't the sales pitch. This is just to position the rest of the webinar. And everything here is based on prior conversations that we've had over the last 20 years of business and delivering security penetration testing to our clients. People who knew, understood what it was, and those clients who didn't understand what it was, and recommending some simple things that they understood what they needed to do. The presentation today is all advice, and it's advice that we routinely give our clients. Oh, hold on. Hold on a second. Okay, everybody see the screen? I'm assuming you can. I was just told nobody could see the screen. See, it's little things like that haunt me in webinars. Okay, so we were talking about who we are, but the point is, it's not who we are, it's what we do and what we recommend. And this webinar is a result of those recommendations. So it's on one hand, it's a lot like free consulting, and who doesn't like that? All right, so today we're going to cover about 6 things. 6 things that we see you need to focus on to get the most out of your security penetration testing. The approach to your testing, the objective of your testing, the scope of your testing, obviously, and the methodology, making sure you get the right qualifications from your testing provider, and this all leads into the right report. All right, so I want to walk through each one of these 6 elements that are comprised of getting the most out of your testing, and then go back and say, all right, for this element, these are the things that you should, and break down and give you a couple, 5, 6 recommendations under each to optimize the outcome of your pen testing. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to do. My personal objective here is to, if you're a buyer of pen tests, is to try to give you some to make you a better buyer. All right, to make you a better buyer, and to have you focus on asking for more value out of your pen testing. As both a personal and a professional, penchant with me, I don't think that we're getting enough from what we ask of our service providers. All right, so that's my objective, my personal objective in going through these areas, is to make you a better buyer of pen tests and for you to ask for more. All right, what you plan on getting a pen test and what actually happens and the results. Most of my clients, when I talk to them, sit down and talk about their expectations, the difference between what they expected and what they actually have in hand are frankly quite shocking. So I'm trying to close that gap for you here by giving you some common sense recommendations how to get more for your money. All right, I want to start here. That's the idea today, is to make your testing. When I use the word optimize, it's little tiny things that you know, if you did them, you would enhance the effectiveness of your test. All right, so I always start with the obvious, and that's the definition of optimization, making something as effective as possible. Before we get started, you see how many times I get started and then I stop and I go back and I get started again. But first, let's talk about the difference between scanning and testing. Now, I'm sure, just glancing at the attendees of this webinar, that you know the difference. But honestly, I'm shocked. I'm shocked at how many of my clients, when I go in and they ask for a pen test and we sit down, and one of the many questions we ask is, can we get a copy of your last test? And they give us a copy, and we look at the bottom and it says Nessus on the bottom. We say, this is not a penetration test, this is a vulnerability scan. And they said we were told it was a test. And so just the basic definition. Vulnerability scanning is using automated tools to identify known, industry recognized security vulnerabilities associated with a target, a website, a system. Right? When you use the word target, it could be a URL and IP address. All right, but vulnerability scan is an automated process against a database of known vulnerabilities. Penetration testing, something completely different. Think of apples and watermelons. All right, they're not even in the same. Maybe they are in the same food group. Completely two different animals. A pen test is using an assortment of both automated and manual tools to identify and exploit. All right, you just identify both known and unknown vulnerabilities and exploit those vulnerabilities. And this is all done associated with a target to obtain a specific goal. Now look at the difference between the two. In pen testing, you're using both automated and manual tools. You're exploiting, you're looking for known and unknown security vulnerabilities, and that's a big deal. And you're out to do a specific thing, to obtain a specific goal in testing. Right? Get access to a certain file folder, get access to card data, get access to a target. Right? With testing, you have a target that you're trying to achieve, and you're looking to identify and exploit known and unknown vulnerabilities to get access to that target. Completely different from vulnerability scanning. Vulnerability scanning is, in fact, an aspect of pen testing. Before any good pen tester is going to start and look for all the known vulnerabilities. Then part two, he's going to look for the unknown vulnerabilities. All right. Anyway, I got to make sure but it's just shocking to me, and how many clients who are out there purchasing pen tests, and when I ask them for a copy of their last test, they show me a copy of a vulnerability scan. Pen testing is an art. It absolutely is an art form. Vulnerability scan is very valuable for what it's worth, but it is a far cry from a penetration test where you've got an expert who's exploiting vulnerabilities to obtain a specific goal. Very, very different. And therein lie the price difference, obviously, because clients say, well, I've only paid £1,000 for that pen test, and it was 26 websites. And then we said, well, that's why, because it's vulnerability scanning. You didn't come close to a test, an actual penetration test. You see, I'm starting to lecture, and I promised myself I wouldn't do that on this webinar, but okay. You see how that bugs me, and it should bug you. First, know what you're buying. You're buying a pen test. That's 10 steps above some vulnerability scanning. In fact, what any good service provider will say is, you should be doing vulnerability scanning, closing everything down, and then going out and get a pen test. If you're going to hire somebody, a thief, to break into your house, you want to lock up your house, right? Close the front door, close all the windows, slap the dog on the back, turn on your alarm systems, and then pay somebody to see if they can identify vulnerabilities given your defenses and exploit that for access into your house. Okay, there I go. I'm lecturing. You want to do that. All right, so let's talk about the right test. When I hear my clients want the right test, I know that they're thinking about a specific approach, an objective to that test, a scope in that test, a methodology, and they should be concerned with the qualifications of both the company and the testers themselves to get the report, right? To get the right report, you want to make sure that all 6 of these elements are lined up. But this is essential. Okay, before you start any one of these 6, essential element of every one of these 6 are these 3 principles that you're going to focus on this pen test. You're going to assume nothing at all, and you're going to be part of the process between you and your service provider. All right, it's all the quality that you get out of your test is all dependent on your focus in setting up the test, making sure that you don't, nothing is assumed between you and your test provider, and you are in fact part of that process. Focus, assume nothing, be part of the process. If I could show you my tattoo on this webinar, you'd see be part of the process on there. That's the most crucial. But that's the essence of everything I'm going to talk about here. And for the rest is you've got to have these three, and we're going to focus up. We're going to assume nothing and be part of the process. It's the underlying feature of all the advice I want to give you. All right, let's take the right approach. All right, first of all, ask yourself, why are you testing? Why are you testing? Doesn't that sound like a stupid, simple question? I go to a client and say, why do you want a pen test? Why are you testing? What's the point here? What's the goal? What's the outcome? What are you trying to do? And they say, well, I need to test. I want to identify vulnerabilities on this very quickly and say, well, that's vulnerability scanning. That's not a penetration test. But ask yourself, when I say question all assumptions, question the first assumption. Why are you going out and getting a pen test in the first place? Because you have to, because everybody else is, because you were told to do it. But question that assumption. What is a successful pen test? Set your own expectations. How should this test benefit the business? What's in it for us? At the end of this test, how is this business going to benefit from testing? Have you thought this through? 9 out of 10 of my clients do not think about these things. And I go in and ask them, why do you want this test? And they go, well, we have to do it for PCI. So yeah, great, that's okay, good enough. And most times, and maybe that's all you need it for. But when I say question assumptions, I'm saying start from the very first one. What is a pen test? Why do I need it? What's my goal? All right, what's a good pen test? What's a bad pen test? What's in it for the business? Think it through, because I'm telling you, the testers that you engage, they don't know. They're assuming you know. Their assumption is you're buying this pen test from me, you must know what you want it for and what a successful pen test is. All right, as my mom said, you only get what you ask for. So start by questioning, why do I need this pen test? Sit down, breathe in, take a nice long breath, put on your, on your whale music, get into your meditative position and write this down. I'm saying you want to optimize your pen test, start from the very beginning. Document, take pen to paper, type it in and say, these are my objectives. This is what I want to do for the pen test. This is my document, your scope. Document the methodology, document what tools that you want them to use, document what tester qualifications, document what kind of classification scheme you want them to use for the findings, and document, write this down. What does my report look like? Now, maybe you don't know all of these things, and that's understandable, but all through this process, before you put out a purchase order to get that pen test, you need all of these things documented, both internally and of course for your testing supplier. But if you can't sit down right before you do the test and put pen to paper and write a sentence for each one of these things, you shouldn't. You're going to depend on your service provider to do it for you. The service provider will bring objectives and scope and methodology and tools and all this to the table, and you're just going to say yes because your assumption is they know what they're doing. They're professionals. All right, optimizations starts at the very first thing. Sit down, document it yourself. 9 out of 10 pen tests that we do we're pulling information. The service provider ends up saying, can I have the IPs? Can I have the scope? What methodology do you prefer? So rather than have a pull situation, it should be a push situation where you've sat and thought all of these things through, and you've written them out so they're clear. And then you can correct them in discussions with your pen testing provider. Okay, so the right objective, why should you be doing this? What is the purpose of this test? And when I say make no assumption, why you just want to identify vulnerabilities, get a scan. What type of vulnerabilities are you worried about? All vulnerabilities? Because a risk-driven test should be driven by some vulnerabilities, although they might be the same criticality level, they might be higher or they might be critical. If you exploit them, they might give you access to nothing. So some vulnerabilities are more important than others. But what type of vulnerabilities are you looking for? What's the reason you're doing the test? Is it to see if somebody an outside entity, a service provider, can get unauthorized access to the target, the website, the IP address, the systems? Is it, okay, can you get unauthorized access? Can you get unauthorized access to specific information assets? My IP, my credit card database, my HR file, right? What assets specifically? Have you figured this out? If you leave it to a pen testing provider, he'll just say, here's a list of vulnerabilities associated with X number of IPs. But have you figured out what's the objective of this testing? I'm going to spend a lot of money here bringing in a third party who's going to assess the security of my systems, but I want to see if he can get in, escalate privileges, and get access to X. Have you thought of that? Most buyers do not think of that, right? And what assets are you most concerned about? Do you have categories of assets? These are our most sensitive assets. These are our less sensitive assets. Otherwise, everything looks the same. You've heard me say this because I love this saying. I think my grandfather said, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You know, to a pen tester, if you don't tell him what tool to use and he'll just take a hammer, he'll take a Metasploit tool and just start, you know, exploiting any vulnerability that tester finds. But the point is, you have to say, look for these vulnerabilities that, if exploited, could give you unauthorized access to these specific information assets. And right there, you're going to enhance tenfold. You're going to optimize the results of that test. What do you really want out of it? The question is for you to answer, not the supplier. You just want to see if somebody can get access, or can they get access and get administrative privileges and make changes, upload programs. Think it through. Or is this just a compliance test? I need it for PCI. I need it for DPA. Maybe it is. A lot of smaller companies, they buy because they have to buy to be compliant too. But if you're a smart buyer, you're going to maximize your return on your investment, and you're going to figure out, I just don't want to, you know, there's vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities. Run a scanner, it's going to be a lot cheaper. But I want you to exploit only those vulnerabilities that could result in unauthorized access or access to an information asset. What's the purpose of the test? Good example. I would sit down with a client and they want to test for PCI. And I would say, great, can I see your last test? Well, we haven't done one, but here's the last test we did. I hold up the test and I say, great, did they get unauthorized access to cardholder data? Doesn't say that. Well, I don't know. Well, and my response is, shouldn't that be the purpose of the whole test? If you're testing for PCI compliance, it's not just what are the vulnerabilities of your card data environment, is could you exploit any of those vulnerabilities to get unauthorized access to get card data to fraud that data? That's the point, right? Never lose sight of the point of testing. You test for PCI to make sure that somebody can't get access to a card and fraud that card. So why aren't you putting that onus on your security testers and saying, please make sure you do this. I need a PCI compliance pen test, and the objective is get unauthorized access to card data. And that's the kind of connection I'm advocating. You know, you connect those two dots, because if you left it to a pen test provider, they will give you a pen test in accordance with the PCI methodology, but they won't answer that question for you, and you've wasted. And if that question is not answered, you're going to say, well, they gave me a list of my vulnerabilities, and you'll assume that if exploited, I don't know, maybe all of them could get access to cardholder data. Maybe some of them can, some of them can't, but you're not answering the question. You're not achieving the objective of the test. I should have a little light that you guys can press a button and it goes on and says, you're lecturing, Rich, so I can stop. Sometimes just once in a while I hear my voice and say, okay, move on, you made the point. All right, so to optimize, here's an idea. Write a specific objective. I make our clients, we make our clients here at RiskWho commit to an objective. What do you want us to do? A binary yes or no. Could we get in? And if we could get in, what do we get access to? And if that's what we want to, but not just to identify vulnerabilities. That is not security penetration testing. It's exploiting vulnerabilities against the target. So what's the target? Be specific. Write this down. Now here's another thing to do. Consider other things. This might not just be unauthorized access or access to an information asset, but why aren't you including, take a step back, and you want to optimize your testing. The tester's going to be all over your network, all over your website. Why don't you consider, hey, while you're there, take a look at the security features. Take a look at my architectural security, my segmentation, my isolation. Okay, take a look at my IDS, see if it works. Try to upload malware and see if my anti-malware, will identify. See if you can upload an unauthorized application and see if my change management program, my whitelisting program is working. Why aren't you starting to look at all of the security controls and including that into the requirements for testing? Here's an objective. So you could have a lot of objectives. Your objectives are, absolutely see if you can get unauthorized access to our systems, but in doing so, see if you can bypass an IDS or bypass our anti-malware, or if the attack is undertaken, I want you to purposely raise it to a level so people should pick up the phone and call somebody. Hey, I'm looking at abnormal log entries. All right, so your incident reporting and your incident response plan are also tested. You follow what I'm saying? Just widen the scope. If somebody's going to test the effectiveness of your security of your system, then make these other little features while you're in there. Okay, see if you could test my firewall. See if you could put traffic through traffic through a port it shouldn't be forced with, because I spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, a lot of resource on configuration and maintaining that firewall. So include these features in your security testing. Just an idea. Right scope. Right, make sure you got to, we're moving on, second element, so you've got the right approach. Let's talk about the right scope. When I talk about the right scope, it's verifying the target, what's in scope, but just as important, what's out of scope. Okay, it's almost just as important, certainly for the service provider, to understand, all right, these are the target IP addresses or URLs, all right, that host the targets. Fine. Okay, give me a list of things that I might find that I should not try to exploit. Now, these could be third-party partner connections. These could be hosting provider connectivity. Okay, but and in a lot of cases, when you're doing things like social engineering or attacks with remote access Trojans or things, hey, the C-level executives are out of scope for social engineering or what. We get that a lot, but what's in scope is important, but just as important as what's out of scope. Document both sides of the fence. Okay. And then, of course, then check the scope. If you're giving your IP addresses to the service provider, are those the actual IP addresses that host the information assets that you've asked that provider to get unauthorized access to? That's amazing. When we said, have you connected dots in the back? Are these IPs associated with hosting, processing, storing, or transmitting the information assets that you want us to see if we can get unauthorized access to? All right, so where does your network start? Where does it stop? That's a big question to a pen tester, especially in these days. You're thinking about Office 365, Internet of Things connections. Step back and look back. And here's the other reason. A lot of people get a pen test report and they go, oh, okay, this is great. Here's our pen test report. And it's based on the assumption that all the technology used to process, store, transmit information assets for the business was in scope. Okay, like IoT, because and you say, hey, great, we've got little or no vulnerabilities, but there could be a lot of technology that was out of scope of testing, and you want and a good pen test should tell you this was in scope, but do not make the assumption that you do not have vulnerabilities with IoT or Office 365 or mobile devices, etc. So this understanding of, remember, what you ask for is what you'll get. You're going to get a very segmented view. And a lot of people, I've had clients who asked us, don't test these, but test that. Why? Because they want a good looking pen test report to give to the board. And they purposely don't test other parts of the architecture. That's not as, okay, that happens all the time. As a provider, we're used to that. But I'm saying, if you're not doing that, never mistake that a report includes the whole environment. I almost said enchilada, and I just, because it's lunch and I haven't had lunch, and I thought, no, don't bring food into your head, but that's too late. Okay, so right scope, what's in, what's out, just as important. Understand where your network starts, where it starts. So you want to optimize that? Yeah, absolutely. You need to think about when you look at where's my network start and where does it stop, and what's in scope and what's out of scope. I'm saying, fine, if you're not including mobile devices, or at least a sample of mobile devices in your pen testing, you have to put things in perspective and understand you're only testing the tip of the iceberg. I'd suggest you look at remote connections, remote authentication, VPNs, especially commercial partner connections, third-party supplier, vendor connections. Talked about 365 or Salesforce, or your hosting provider, what's in, what's out. So you should be going through a checklist and carefully taking things, putting in things in scope or out of scope based on what in fact does process, store, transmit my assets. Okay, and of course, staff. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at we just got an incoming question. Yep, sorry. Hold on a sec while I look this. Yep. Should COVID affect my testing scope? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We're all working from home nowadays. Are you? And I've got a client just ordered pen test yesterday, and what's one of the questions we asked them? What about working from home environments? You want to put a sample in there? No, no, no. And I'm thinking, well, okay, 75% of your staff is working from home and has been for the last 6 months, but you want to pen test your local area network and your website. And that's almost ignoring what's underneath the ice. That is the tip of the iceberg, pen testing. So a good question. Should I be in COVID? Should I be testing home environments? My recommendation to you as a service provider is why not? Absolutely. Isn't that what you should be concerned about? Isn't that the new risk, the unknown unknown? These testing connections, these work from home connections. What are the security vulnerabilities associated with these, and can they be exploited for unauthorized access to the mainframe? So anyway, good question. Here we've got a slide because I want to talk about social engineering. This whole slide webinar series is on holistic, all right, is thinking about stepping back and testing people, process, and technology. But certainly it is so easy these days to take a regular pen test scope and include some baseline social engineering attacks, all right, some phishing, some vishing, some telephone pretexting attacks sampled to get an idea, to pick up metrics. All right, so what we would recommend is absolutely consider expanding the scope, maybe not all the staff, but a certain percentage of staff or high risk staff, all right, staff that has that immediate access to very sensitive information assets. But you should look and define a very specific objective associated with that staff and apply it to that staff, specific location, specific time of day, attacks, and make sure you capture these in metrics so you can test them again and again and again and again. You collect KPIs, you collect key performance indicators from your social engineering and benchmark that against your social awareness, your security awareness program, sorry, to make sure that next time you do it, do the exact same attacks at the exact same time of day using the exact same testing methodologies and see if that needle has gone down or in fact risen. And another piece of free advice I always give every client is you do social engineering, whether it's part of pen testing or a standalone project, tell your staff. You don't try to catch people out. Tell your staff. Say it can be as simple as in the next 90 days, we've hired some people to do some social engineering against the staff. Because that way you're going to test a sample that everybody has their antenna up. You've told them to be aware of clicking on links or giving their credentials out over the phone. Okay, so then when you get the metrics, when you get those KPIs, there's no excuses. In fact, they're more solid to you because this is your team, this is your staff operating at their best. This is your staff operating with a warning that, hey, in the next 3 months, we're going to be doing some social engineering around here. So, be aware and then take those stats. For me, that's a better representation about your staff at their best, because anybody can catch their staff at the worst. So I've seen a lot of social engineering results used against, that reflect poorly on everybody. Give them their best shot. Put them in their best, so they're in their most aggressive posture, looking to identify these things, then conduct social engineering. Okay. All right, so we're talking about the right scope. We're going to move on to what's the right methodology. How would you know, right? What's the tester's methodology? Is it NIST? Is it check? Is it PCI? Is it CREST? Is it OWASP? How would you know? But you need to know. You need to know that whatever it is that your tester uses is applicable to the objective. All right. I've had people come in and say, I want you to use a NIST pen testing methodology against a website, and we say, well, for website you really want to go to OWASP. So you want to use the right tool, the right methodology, because I think that's a tool again for the right job. It's like handing a plumber a hammer. You want to make sure you give that tradesman the right job to do the job. Now, what is it? Maybe you don't know the tool. You don't know what this is where I say you get involved. All right, you pick up the phone, you talk to your provider, say, what would you recommend? Here's what I'm trying to achieve. What methodology would you recommend? What tools are you going to recommend? Does OWASP meet my PCI requirements? Does NIST, does CHECK, does CREST? If it's compliance-driven testing, and is it applicable to the current threat landscape? Right, but this methodology, one of the biggest assumptions when you go out and find and engage with a service provider is that they know what they're doing. And you know what? It's a safe assumption, but you're also assuming they're going to use the right tool for the job. And this is where I'm strongly advocating you get involved. If you don't know, ask. And here's how do you spell Google? Google. Google it. You can Google this and say, I've got a website that transacts credit cards. What would be the best testing methodology? And you'll get overwhelmed. Now you just take that and then engage with a fundamental, this is what the industry recognizes, this is the right methodology for the right test objective, and discuss it with your testing provider. That's all I'm advocating, is have that discussion. So you're a better buyer next time, and you understand the difference between these methodologies, and it's like for like. You use the right methodology for the right testing objective or compliance requirement. Okay, get involved. So you've got to make sure to optimize this, and make sure that consider requiring that the methodology absolutely has to entail. You need to mandate that. It's not the methodology that just identifies vulnerabilities, but exploits vulnerabilities. Right, make sure that any methodology used has a process for exploiting methodologies found. Otherwise, you're off piste. You're looking at vulnerability scanners. All right, make sure the testers explain the methodology and the vulnerability register use. So testers will use a methodology and they'll identify a vulnerability and they'll classify that vulnerability. Low, medium, high, critical, very high. But there's classification schemes for these vulnerabilities, because they all come from different databases in the industry. So you should understand where they're getting the classification for these, and make sure that they explain, I'm using this tool in this phase. I'm using this scanner for my discovery. I'm using this tool for my exploit. I'm using these tools to clean up, etc. They should walk you through that. But I'm suggesting you require it. You ask for it. Don't assume that they're going to do it. You ask them to explain the methodology, explain the tool set, and make sure both are conducive, both ensure that vulnerabilities are exploited and they're conducive to you reaching your objective. Another thing I'm strong on and is, if you can, and I know especially during COVID, it's hard to get a tester on site, but the knowledge transfer alone from having a tester go to your offices and hook up and sit down and have the ability to say, whoa, come here, take a look at what I found, and show you right there, and you get that tactile understanding of here's a vulnerability and here's how easily they exploited it. It's not done behind a curtain. It's done right with you, with the ability to bring over and transfer this knowledge to your staff. That's crucial for us. Very few of our clients take us up, but we strongly recommend having a tester come on site. Maybe not the whole test, but very specific parts of the test, the high risk parts that you really do want an intimate understanding of of the vulnerability and how easily or how difficult it is to exploit that vulnerability. But getting that knowledge transfer is an easy way to optimize the output from the test. The test is finished and they leave you much smarter about the whole process. Okay, here's a good idea, and here's one that not a lot of people talk about, but you getting the right qualifications from your testers. Do they need to be checked? Do they need to be Tiger? Do they need to, how many years experience, But at the end of the day, our customers make a big assumption that the service they buy from us is going to be delivered by professionals with certifications and a minimum of experience, subject to background checks. They've tested similar systems. All right, my point to you is, how do you know that? How do you know that unless you ask your testing provider? Right, this idea of trust but verify. Okay, we're assuming, and I say this because everybody's, the biggest subject in our industry today is the skills shortage. Okay, there's a crisis of good, a shortage of good pen testers out there. So it seems to me that the obvious discussion you need to have is, okay, you look like a good pen testing provider to me. Can you give me the CVs of the people who will be testing? Can I see the minimum background? Can I see can I see their qualifications? Require it. Require a certificate. Now, if you don't know their certifications, talk to your provider and say, what is a CREST tester, a CREST certified tester? What does that entail? And same thing, Google. But talk to them about certifications, about the difference between an OSCP or a CISSP or a certified ethical hacker or a CREST or a Tiger Scheme tester. What is the minimum? My point is, ask the question, because I tell you, as a service provider, I'm dying to answer it for you, and I'm dying to work with you and get you the right tester. Okay, this idea of your tester is going to have an intimate knowledge of your vulnerabilities. It's going to be like your analyst. You're interviewing. You should be interviewing them. You should get them on the phone and say, "I'd like to talk to them." Meet them, talk to them, say, "What do you like about pen testing? What do you not like? Why are you in it?" Get an idea of this person and what makes them tick. Are they inquisitive, or are they, do they like to manually exploit, or are they more heavily reliant on automated tools? Meet these testers, review them. Why wouldn't you do that? Earlier, I gave you the example, you're going to hire somebody to break into your house. Well, you wouldn't just take anybody sight unseen. You'd want that person you'd want to see them face to face. You want to understand, okay, how long you've been breaking into houses? Why do you like to break into houses? Where are the easiest places to break into houses? What tools do you use? Talk to them, get a sense of their mindset, get a sense of their passion for what they do. Have them explain the tool set and how it's conducive to what you're trying to do. This idea that you're interviewing an artist, not a plumber. That's very, very true. And if you don't get involved with your personal, maybe it's a team, maybe it's 5 or 6 testers, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 1. The point is, you should have a personal relationship where you've got the ability prior to the test to talk through and understand and set your own expectations, and more importantly, the tester's expectations about what you expect on the other side. That's the easiest way to optimize it. Okay, all of this comes down to reports. Now, reports are reports, but again, I take you back to basics and say, what do you want? What do you need? You want a non-technical? Do you want a technical? Do you want both? What format? Do you want a PowerPoint? Do you want me to put it on a T-shirt? What are your compliance requirements? Does it need to? Is it for PCI or DPA? And you need the report to plainly say this meets compliance requirements. Do you need a certificate of testing? What evidence do you need? What evidence does the report have to show to make sure that it brings and make it operational? If you just need an Excel spreadsheet with a list of vulnerabilities and a PowerPoint with an executive summary so you understand it turns into a list of things to do, that's practical. Ask for it. Okay, right report. Okay, so here's ways to optimize that. Just make sure, first, square one, you open up page 1. Was the testing target achieved? Was the objective achieved? Did you get unauthorized access? Did you get access to privileges? Could you escalate those privileges? This should be a binary yes/no questions that are addressed in the report. Make sure you ask for it. All right, make sure that you say, here's the objective, and I want a written response to the objective. You were tasked with giving unauthorized access to the website. Were you able to achieve it within the scope and the time agreed? And ask for that binary yes or no. Absolutely, you should have visual evidence. Here's the vulnerabilities we found. Here's how they were exploited. Ask for it. And then make sure everybody does this very well, confirms remedial. Here's what we found, here's how to remediate it. But what people don't do well, what providers don't do well, because they need that interaction with you to do it, is to connect, here's our findings, and here's the real risk to the business. What we see in the bulk of pen tests, and I'm sure what you see in the bulk of your pen tests, are a list of vulnerabilities, but what the one was similar to the last test was conducted a year earlier, 6 years earlier, not at all. But give it some context. So the report, because all of this report is like it's a snapshot in time. All right, it's a perspective of your system at a time and a place in the year. All right, that prior to a change, so it needs perspective, it needs context. So make sure that not just the date of the report is clear, but the last report, so you can see, so you can understand between the last report and this report, this is the amount of risk we incurred or reduced. But these very, very specific things are my clients don't ask for them. And I'm just shocked. My clients, and I go and I look at their last report and I say, here's a pen test. Like I gave you that example of PCI. Here's your PCI pen test, and nobody answered the question, could they get access to card data? And isn't that why you did it in the first place? Okay, so to optimize these things to make sure you get the right thing. Now I just got one slide. Let me bore you. I know we're moving. Yeah, we're a little slow on time. All right, once you've gone to test, all right, it's not done. You should be looking at the test and understanding how can I get more value from this test. So here's a short to-do list. First of all, for me it's big. Did anybody identify the testing? Did the staff? Did the IT? Do you have a NOC? Do you have that somebody monitoring the system? Do you have a hosting provider monitoring, a firewall provider monitoring the firewall? Anybody raise their hand, pick up a phone, and call you and say, "Hey, we're seeing unusual activity on the firewall"? Staff, if you included social engineering, did staff say, "Hey, this is strange. I'm getting calls, saying during COVID I need to change my password and I was asked for my credentials"? Okay, so I'm saying take a look. Remember, I said first to enhance and get more out of your testing. Start to take a step back and understand the bigger process, all of the things that you have in place now. So what's that saying? If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? What was the effect of the testing on all the other things? Were incident reporting procedures followed? Were response procedures implemented? Did anybody confirm the activity was, this is what happened in our firewall logs, this is what happened in the IDS logs, this is what happened in our file integrity logs? Any KRIs, any key risk indicators that you have and you use to identify risk, did they trigger and say, hey, somebody's trying to obtain privileges they shouldn't have? Were any KPIs, any control KPIs, key performance indicators, were they effective? All right, this should be so the background of the test, take the test results, go back in and look at the landscape of everything you've put in place and see the impact of the testing to make to provide the answers. Do I need to change my KPIs, or can I improve the next test? Because that's what it's all about, right? Continuous improvement. This is what we should be doing with each and every test. This is what we strive to do here at Risk Crew. Say, here's your last test. Okay, fine. Now, how can we raise the bar? How can we raise the bar and give you continuous improvement? And to do that, you need to pick up KPIs, key performance indicators for each test that you can duplicate in the next test to push you forward and constantly raise the bar and reduce the risk of a breach. But you should have any organization has a continuous improvement program for any IT project, and I find very few that include outsourcing of security penetration testing to make sure that KPIs are included and verified year after year after year, and you are continuously improving the security integrity of the system. That was a dramatic pause, by the way. Okay, continuous improvement. Why do we leave this out of pen testing? I don't get it. That's it. We're going to wind this down. So, these 6 elements, if you focused on these and bring things to the table, the approach, the objective, the scope, the methodology, the qualifications are going to get then and only then, and what you want out of the report. You need to think this thing through. These requirements lay on your shoulders, not the service providers. If you leave it to a service provider, they'll make assumptions for all of this, and you'll just get a vanilla pen test. And I'll be frank, you'll just get a list of vulnerabilities associated with the target, and that's okay. But the more that you get involved, more value you're going to get. I cannot state this enough. Everything I told you to write down, I told you to write it down so you could put it into the service level agreement. Because like my mom said, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it. So writing it down is one thing. Then take that notepad of here's my scope, here's my objective, here's my methodology, here's the testing experience and credentials I want, here's this, here's that, and then you take all that and you put it into a service level agreement to make sure contractually it is required. Contractually that the service provider is required to answer the question, did you get in? Did you get unauthorized access? Could you get admin privileges? And clarifies this, make it contractually required, or my assumption would be you're not going to get it. And that's not cynicism, that's just commercial, that's anybody who works in procurement can tell you that. At the end of the day, if you have a dispute, it's all going to be settled by what did you ask the service provider to do? Did you ask the service provider for it in PowerPoint, or for the report to be encrypted before it was sent over? Because if you didn't ask and it was sent over unencrypted and it was compromised, you really can't, you don't have a leg to complain on. A leg to complain on. You need to stand on that leg and then complain. A leg to stand on and then complain. All right. Anyway, you get my point. It's got to be in writing. It's got to be in the contract. And all of this common, all of this advice that I'm giving you, albeit common sense, needs to find its way into a written document, and that document is your SLA for your service provider. Okay. My last thoughts is the ones I started you out with. This is about your focus, not the service providers. You need to assume nothing. I cannot be, can't give you stronger advice than that. If you assume something and leave it up to the provider, the chances are it will be overlooked. You need to articulate what it is you're looking for, and you can only do that by being part of the process. You've got to get involved. This is not an IT project. It's a business project, all right? You want an output, you want a deliverable that clearly reflects the cyber risk to the business, right? So you've got to align all of your goals and objectives to the business risk goals and objectives, and then require it in proof. Quantify it. Make sure you've got visual proof. Make sure that you understand and quantify the risk to the greatest extent possible through this test. Okay. It was fun? Not so much, no. Sorry to preach. It's odd because we love to do testing, and I think people seem to expect so much from penetration testing and market, and hey, nobody's got a big budget for penetration testing, and it's just odd that and everything I told you today, technically, when you think about it, is common sense, but people just assume, hey, I'll go out and hire a plumber and they know what they're doing. Well, I was a plumber's apprentice, and I got to tell you, there's a reason I'm not doing it anymore. Okay, any questions? We've got some time for questions. Any comments? I went light on the jokes specifically because somebody sent in a couple comments and said, less jokes, more content. So I've tried to do that. I don't know if anybody knows. Okay, here's a question. How often should I change testing providers, Rich? That's a good question. I like that question. My first response is, are you doing everything that we just talked about for the last half hour? Okay, because that to me is the first thing to do. Now think if you went through all of these things, if you had a relationship with a provider where you understood their methodology, their tools, you had a personal relationship with their testers, okay, and they were quite clear on your business risk goals and objectives. Right, that's a relationship I wouldn't walk away from too quickly. Now, the industry answer is change them every year, get a new set of eyes. And you know what, on one level, I agree with that. As an industry professional, I'd say, yeah, I can see the sense of that. You bring in a new tester, but I would only advocate if you're buying value from the first tester, okay, and you buy value from the next tester and the next tester. And my pitch to you today was, optimize what you're currently buying. And then you're going to, because I would suggest that you realize at the end of that, you're going to have a very close relationship with your penetration testing provider. And that's not one you might want to walk away from for the next test. But it's certainly one that you should seek out with every single testing provider you get. So on one hand, I absolutely have to agree. Sure, if you're buying value now and you're an educated buyer, you should be changing every year. There's sense to that. Get another set of eyes, get more tools, interview other testers, other ideas. Variety is great. But on the other hand, I know that we've done testing for clients over several years, and we get better and better every year because we have a more intimate understanding of their risk objectives. And in terms of team, we just put another set of eyes on it in the team within, which you can also ask for. Ask your current testing provider if you have a good relationship. I want the same product, but use different testers this time. And then you're still going to get that. And you could do that for however big the testing provider is. Hope that answers it. What's better, white hat, gray hat, or black hat testing? Oh man, I was hoping somebody wouldn't ask me that. It's obviously, it's because I left it out. It's because, all right, so white hat testing is full knowledge, right? Full knowledge of the target. which would be logon credentials, system diagram, every application, every operating system, here's everything. That's my analogy of you're hiring somebody to break in your house, and so you bring the thief in the house and you walk them around, you show them, here's my jewels, here's a cabinet, here's how you get downstairs, here's the chimney, here's the vents. You're showing them everything. Okay, and for me, there's just no question whatsoever. And then a gray hat, or let's start with a black hat, is zero knowledge. Right? You're going to hire a thief to break into your house and you don't even give them your home address. Okay, yeah, maybe there's some sense into that. Depends what you want out of it. Or gray hat, which is a combination of the two. All right, here's the IP addresses. You find what the service is running on them. You see if you can exploit. All right, so where I come down on this is, black hat, that's you could pay somebody to drive around your neighborhood for 6 days and they never find your house. And believe me, I've seen that. So black hat is very much a question of quantity, of how many days that a service provider will allot to a black hat test. Take 10 days, take 5 days, take 1 day. But, literally, they could be, I'm more of an advocate of white hat testing or gray hat testing if you're a mature provider and you want to test certain elements and understand. Maybe you just made a change on that part of the network, so you want to look at that. But people call us and ask for a black hat test. I say, and I take them back to the same question. Why? Because I want to know what a hacker can see. Well, why don't you do that? Why don't you, but yeah, that for me, that's not a cost-effective outcome, and it certainly doesn't give you the value of all the areas that we just covered. So I'm an advocate of white hat testing or gray hat minimum. I would personally, I don't know who came up with black hat testing, but in terms of, we are on the defense, and the more you tell me of what you know, the more helpful that I can be as a service provider to say, hey, but you didn't know this, did you? And rather than spend my time on things that you know but I don't know, and you want to see if I can find that out. It's up to you, though. It's your pound to spend, as they say. Okay, run out of time. That's my fault. I apologize for it. Yeah, and we said the camera adds 10 pounds, 12 pounds in some cases, and that I have a tendency to lecture, and I apologize for both of those things. Anyway, this is one of a series. We've got the series of webinar on, we're calling 3 degrees, a holistic test people, test process, test technology, and stop thinking about pen tests as just a technology thing. So we're trying to launch a series of webinars. They're all on our website. They're all recorded. You can download this as well as the other ones for future. I hope it was helpful. We try to be helpful, and funny, but mostly we're just helpful. But thanks for your time. If you have a question, my email address here, if you don't have it, is richard.hollis@riskcrew.com. Send it in. I'd be happy to help you. You can download, I think I just said that, you can download this webinar and get a copy of these things. But if I get any questions come in, I'll answer them offline straight. I'll get you an answer back. I appreciate you taking the time with us. Can you do me a favor? I hope so. Can you, right after this webinar, there's a short, I think there's 3 or 5 questions, and they're questions about these subjects we talk about. Do you do this? Do you think about this? And it helps us quantify our, people who are buying testing, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for, where their emphasis is. But if you could take just 2 minutes, it takes all of 2 minutes and 3 seconds. I've timed it to answer a couple short questions at the end of this. We'd really be appreciative. In the meantime, look after yourself. I hope everybody stays safe out there, and thanks for joining us. Thank you very much.